Two very quick points. Number one, I think, first of all, I must congratulate you, Swati. You have a delicious sense of irony. Here we are talking about unparliamentary language, and one of the panelists from the TMC is perhaps one of the most abusive persons around. He had to take back and apologize for calling the finance minister a sales girl. And you've called him on the panel, and he's deliberating on what is abusive and what is not. So, next you will have this lackey saying that what Mamta Didi said, Pichon Bansh, is also parliamentary. So yes, can you ask him to not being unparliamentary? He is a member of Rajya Sabha. Let him be unparliamentary there. This is not Rajya Sabha. Okay. So now, as I was saying, two very quick points. Number one, Tehseen did not comment on the fact that most of these words that have been expunged previously, and this was a compendium as clarified by the speaker, were done so in Congress-ruled states. Tehseen will not say that Congress-ruled assembly actually expunged the word corruption. He sidestepped it. So this is an absolute fake news that has been spread, and the canard has been clarified by the speaker. The question was...
Sure.
Tehseen... Yeah, thank you. You asked me a very pointed question about censorship. I partly agree with you. This is an old school boys toying around. I would call them arrested adolescents. How can somebody ban someone calling democracy dictatorship? I am not for any censorship except if it is a direct abuse. The point of the matter is that this is fake news. That is the whole point. The issue is none of the words have been banned as was alleged since morning. The speaker has already clarified these are expunged words. Okay. A compendium. Most of it was collated through Congress-ruled assemblies. Tehseen, please clarify, why did Rajasthan Assembly expunge corruption? Why? Thank you very much. You are absolutely right, Swati. Look, the so-called PFI India Vision 2047 document is not so much a terror manual as it is a declaration of Islamic jihad against India. Let us be very plain about it. But the thing is, it doesn't surprise me. From Sir Syed to Iqbal to Jinnah to Jalaluddin now, we have to understand the psyche. Ambedkar understood it really well, as he reiterated that as far as Islam is concerned, the world is divided into two regions, Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam. And the Muslims cannot rest until Dar al-Harb is converted into Dar al-Islam, unquote. A country which is ruled by a kafir, said Dr. Ambedkar, is Dar al-Harb to a Musliman. The basic feelings of deference and sympathy which predispose persons to obey the authority of government do not simply exist, unquote. These Islamists are out to prove Dr. Ambedkar right. There is documented proof, Swati, that the PFI is an organization neck deep in acts of terror, bomb making, training camps, political murders, links with Al-Qaeda and Islamic fundamentalism. It came into prominence after Simi was banned. Many PFI leaders are actually ex-Simi. This is not me saying it, but the Kerala police and the High Court. Let me give you just one example of PFI's criminal antecedents. On July 4, 2010, PFI activists chopped off the hand of a teacher named Joseph for allegedly framing a question paper that insulted Muhammad. The irony was the Joseph had meant not Prophet Muhammad, but Kunju Muhammad, the man on whose book he had framed his question. Joseph was sacked from his job. Joseph's wife committed suicide. In 2015, 13 PFI activists were convicted by the court for this crime. Hundreds of PFI leaders and activists have been charged under the UAPA, all under the Congress and the Communists. But the moment the BJP comes to power, the former start supporting such organizations, play the victim card, hum khatre mein hain, chirag bujhane ki koshish hai, dara hua Musalman, etc. And at the same time, support such organizations that want to break up India.
I think I must
applaud the Muslim cleric, Swati, in your report, who not only agreed with the RSS gentleman, he in fact was very emphatic about what the RSS person said, and he completely wholeheartedly not only agreed, he said yes, this should be done. Now if a Muslim cleric is agreeing with an RSS man, that itself tells you something, that the RSS person is on the right track. And let me tell you, the last 3 or 4 years, if at all someone has not been very critical when they should be, of what has been going on, it is the RSS. First by saying that the Muslims have the same DNA symbolically or whatever you may like. In fact, there are Muslims who need to go much more critical than what the RSS has been, and I'm glad the Maulana has. I'll give you two reasons for this. What is happening right now increasingly in India, Swati, has been happening in Kashmir for too long.
Yes.
It is another matter that because of propaganda by the leftists and Islamists, they have somehow detached the happenings of Kashmir as though they are no longer meant to be happening in India. So what happens in Kashmir is altogether considered as something separate. It's almost like another nation. कि वहाँ पे communal bigotry, वहाँ पे ये stone pelting, उसकी बातें ही मत करो because वो कश्मीर है, India नहीं है. The problem is that this happens regularly. It has been normalized after Friday prayers. You yourself have told about how ISIS flags have been unfurled, how in the Srinagar main mosque, ISIS flags were actually unfurled inside the mosque after Friday prayers. Stone pelting is a regular occurrence. And my good friend Mr. Hamid Ansari has been saying that how would you feel if I were to say that, after Ram Navami, there is a correlation with violence? He is absolutely right. There was correlation with violence in Ram Navami. Ram Navami processions were pelted with stones and by Muslim mobs. So there is a correlation. Problem is, many Muslims have now started to recognize it. They don't want this to be normalized because it is not good for their own image as well as the image of the nation. So when Muslim clerics are recognizing it, why aren't other Muslims? I'll tell you why. Because the Muslim moderates are the ones who are embarrassed. I was absolutely outraged, as many were, about the utterances of Supreme Court. As you know, as many as 150 odd ex-judges of the court, High Court and Supreme Court have expressed their outrage at the verbal outrage of the Supreme Court that did not go into the written order. So that's a different matter. I'm outraged.
Yes.
But I'm amused why Mr. Majid Hydari, who in the wake of a Supreme Court judgment said Sharia is above the Supreme Court on October 14, 2017. Let him deny this. Mr. Majid Hydari said Sharia is above the Supreme Court, and today he is siding with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, good evening, Navika. It's an absolutely smashing debate, a wonderful debate, and I congratulate all my fellow panelists for making very, very many excellent points. But as to the points that I feel they have made that are suspect, please allow me to rebut them without interruption, because I have been waiting very patiently for my time. So let me start one by one. First, with the good Dr. Raman, as to him saying, why would you believe someone who calls himself an ISI spy when he also believes in outlandish theory? Why, with that logic, why would anyone ever believe someone who believes in flying horses and man walking on water, or water turning to wine, or immaculate conception? I mean, these two things don't gel well. As to what Mr. Patra says, I agree with Dr. Raman that Mr. Patra has made a very serious research and analysis wing and the suspect role of Mr. Former Vice President in it. It has to be investigated, and just like Mr. Raman says, it has been 8 years. Dr. Patra, for him saying that these things take time, well, do they take 80 years or 800 years? If you can't do it in 8 years, what do you expect to do? Number three, as far as Tehseen is concerned, of course, you're absolutely right. He's made a lot of whataboutery allegation. But can I please come to this topic, take a minute and then address Tehseen as well? Navika, I must say this, the matter is serious. And it must be investigated to its logical end, because it is a constitutional post. The second highest in terms of hierarchy, if I am not mistaken. And of course, it goes without saying that a man is innocent until proven guilty. The other thing, two things important that I have to say out here, that even though the matter is serious, the matter is not about the former vice president meeting a Pakistani. No, it's not, because to be honest, Mr. Modi also met, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. It is about him in the same room, possibly meeting an ISI spy. If you remember, around the same time, there was a gentleman called Ghulam Nabi Fai. Do you remember him? You did a fantastic show on it, I remember. He met a lot of Indian journalists, Indian diplomats and Indian politicians. Later turned out that he was convicted in a US court for being an ISI spy. I remember he in fact tried to recruit Gautam Navlakha as well. So the other thing, also around the same time, Navika, you must remember we entered into this absolutely crazy Sharm el-Sheikh agreement. So soon after the 2811, we enter into an agreement with Pakistan where Pakistan extracts This statement from us that India will also not interfere into Baluchistan and terrorism out there, which was absolutely shameful. So, yes, our government at that time was doing some really crazy things. But it has to be said that the matter, and unequivocally I say this, the matter is not about the religion of the former vice president, as Tehseen, my good friend, is alleging. Because Ghulam Fai met a lot of non-Muslims and tried to recruit them as well. I don't care which faith the former vice president belongs to, as long as his allegiance is first and foremost to India. But it also has to be said, Navika, just 30 seconds, that it is Mr. Ansari himself who repeatedly brings up his religion. Who can forget? He's coining the euphemism Dara Hua Musalman. Sheer genius on his part. All around us, all we see are Dara Hua Musalmans. From Jammu, where Dara Hua Musalmans are shouting from top of mosque that they will behead Nupur and all those who oppose Azan and Hijab, to Hubli, where Dara Hua Musalmans are pouring onto streets because some Hindu kid photoshopped a Bhagwa flag, from Aurangabad, where Dara Hua Musalmans are writing in the streets because someone Facebook post said Aurangzeb was a mass murderer, to Assam, where Dara Hua Musalmans are burning down police station. Everywhere you look, we see Mr. Ansari's Dara Hua Musalman. So thank you, Mr. Ansari, for being an oracle. And who can forget the man's antecedents for actually felicitating the PFI chief? So he comes with a baggage of history. But it is not about religion, it is about what he does. All that said, to say this,
absolutely,
with all responsibility, that it is this government's responsibility to investigate this. Navika, I would have disowned Tehseen, but he treated me to a lunch, so I'm being kind to him. Tehseen, enough of your whataboutery. Let me give you two reasons here. Number one, Navika, when you talk about bilateral ties, can I please correct you? Because at the time this conference was held, where all these people are kowtowing and hobnobbing with the Pakistani spy, India had already entered into Sharm el-Sheikh agreement in 2009. Shamefully capitulating and agreeing that India will not interfere in the affairs of Pakistan, especially Baluchistan. Such a shameful thing. Tehseen hasn't answered that. He is the king of whataboutery, but he will not talk about Sharm el-Sheikh agreement. Secondly, I want to ask Tehseen a very simple question, which Dr. Raman also, put his hand on. Talking about this outlandish spy, outlandish. You know, there is a Congress leader right now, Tehseen, who believes that 9/11 was orchestrated by the US government. He's on record, there's a video of him. Do you know what his name is, Congress leader's name? It is Kanhaiya Kumar. Do you disown Kanhaiya Kumar? Do you want him to be sacked from Congress?